Hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to a new week after what was, in my view, probably the best weekend of the whole summer, and I hope you got to enjoy it. I am doing my first live stream on my new computer, which means I had to do all the settings all over again. So keep your fingers crossed. The signal tonight is a bit on the tenuous side. So hopefully everything goes all well, and hopefully you are hearing me with a reasonably good audio. So let's get going here because we have, this has been the last 5 or 6 weeks has been watching a rubber band being stretched and then watching that rubber band snapping back. And I think that's where we are kind of at atmospherically here with respect to tomorrow. We have a fairly substantial severe weather threat. It matches up very well with the last 4 or 5 severe weather threats that we've had in this area going back to June. They're kind of lining up the same. We have this northern jet stream that drops southward. You get a weather trough to come through, an upper air disturbance, a shortwave trough to swing through. The jet buckles up a little bit, then another shortwave comes down, and I think it really is going to be a matter of watching tomorrow, especially tomorrow morning, to see how much sunshine occurs and how much daytime heating you get as we bring the front close later in the day, and we start to see thunderstorms triggered off. I think you're going to see some renegade cells form around the middle of the day into the afternoon, and then you get the main line of storms. And it's a very extensive area of risk that we're talking about. I think of all the severe weather outbreaks that we've had in the last month or so, this one, from the standpoint of what the Storm Prediction Center is doing, is probably the most impressive of the bunch. They didn't even wait to the actual day to beef it up like this. They started right off the bat with a large area of slight risk, and today going to enhanced risk. So this is their latest forecast, where the northern edge of the slight risk is right to about New York City, northern New Jersey, almost to just north of Allentown in Pennsylvania. And then you have that enhanced risk running across from about Sandy Hook to just north of Trenton, and then turning back southwestward into south, not quite all the way into southwest PA, eastern West Virginia, and across northern Virginia. You don't see enhanced risk too often in the mid-Atlantic states and points northward. And I think it's justified given what the models are showing. And you have the slight risk extending all the way back into Tennessee and Kentucky. So this gives you the nature of the front. It's this long cold front that's going to be coming on through and impacting a fairly large area. Now that marginal risk pushes up into the Hudson Valley and into Connecticut along Route 84. Now, if it winds up being nudged up a little bit further north, that's going to really depend on the extent of the warm sector tomorrow. So you're going to look for clues with regards to where's the warm tropical air setting up, how high are the temperatures going to get. Now, I pulled up the dew points here for 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, so it's going to be interesting to see if these verify. And you'll notice the 70 dew points, which I think is a pretty good indicator here of where you're probably going to see some fairly hefty cells. You've got 70-degree dew points pushing to New York City and even into parts of the Hudson Valley, Connecticut, and southern Rhode Island. So that sort of justifies where that northern edge of the marginal risk is. And then you've got low 70 dew points running over Long Island, almost all of New Jersey, and then over into eastern Pennsylvania from about Allentown. If you draw a line from Allentown to about State College on southward, you're seeing those dew points up into the low 70s. So I think the atmosphere is certainly going to be fairly ripe. And think of the fact that we're going from dew points in the low 50s and in some cases even dew points in the 40s and running them up very, very quickly into the low 70s. In pretty much less than 24 hours, you're seeing a 20-degree rise in the dew points. That's a lot. That's a sizable amount of tropical forcing that is occurring. So you've got that at play, and you also have the upper air. Now, over the last couple of weeks, I've been using the NAM 700 millibar level, which is roughly the 10,000 foot level. It's been a really good indicator of the severity of these storms, rather than focus on whatever the models put out on their surface maps with what they think the radar is going to look like. I think this has been a much better tool. And going through the afternoon and into tomorrow evening, those brownish streaks that you see, now those are strong gusty winds. If you look at this map, and you can pull this up for yourself on Tropical Tidbits, you've got the wind barbs here all showing 50 and even some 60 knot winds, and the brownish spots are basically bursts of wind at that level of the atmosphere. This is indicative of convective development. What will happen, or what is forecast to happen, is that some of that wind is going to wind up mixing down. You're going to see downdrafts in some of the stronger storms. And of course, you are also going to bring this shortwave trough through and enhancing those thunderstorms. And going into tomorrow evening, now this is at 8 o'clock tomorrow evening, you've got these jet streaks running from southeastern New England right across New York City into southeast PA, through Maryland, and over into northern West Virginia. So you look at this and you have to think that somewhere in that stretch there will be severe weather. And one of the other things I would emphasize too is the fact that, given the tropical nature of the air mass that we're going to have tomorrow and the slow movement of this front, we're going to have to look at the possibility of some pretty hefty rainfalls coming out from some of these thunderstorms. I wouldn't be shocked to see some 3-inch, 4-inch plus rain amounts in some cells. Now, where those cells are going to be, I couldn't begin to tell you, but it's going to be somewhere inside that risk area, no doubt. Now, looking at what we have with weather conditions now, as of 8 o'clock, 8:07 Eastern time, starting to see the dew points coming up. They've already risen up into the mid-60s across Long Island. We're in the low and mid-60s in pockets in parts of New Jersey. It's kind of uneven, but when you run down further south, down into southern New Jersey, southernmost New Jersey, you get into Delaware. You see these dew points in the mid to upper 60s, even a few low 70 dew points showing up in a few places. And then in and around the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area into northeastern Virginia, you've got these dew points up in the upper 60s and lower 70s. So the atmosphere is starting to do its job. And in the meantime, where there's still some drier air, and you look up into New England, you still have a few pockets of 50s. But even here, the dew points are climbing up into the 60s. So the surface is certainly beginning to rev up as far as getting the moisture in play, getting that tropical moisture into play, and setting the table. Now here's the wide satellite view across the U.S., and we can pick out the strong shortwave trough that is up now, moving through the Great Lakes. And when we look at, by the way, on the tighter view, you can almost, just watching from where all these clouds are, they're moving northwest to southeast. This warm sector is going to be setting up somewhere. If I had to guess early, it looks like the warm front is setting up just north of New York, going to try to set up anyway, just north of New York City and across southern Connecticut, somewhere in there. It's still, the skies are still relatively clear, just some wispy high clouds as you go down from New Jersey down into Delaware, Maryland, and into Virginia. And then you get, of course, into the heavier cloud tops that are blowing off from thunderstorms that are out to the west. So the signatures are starting to show up, but we're really not going to know. It's tomorrow morning going into midday that I think will pretty much tell the tale with regards to how all of this severe weather takes place. Now, here's the current radar at 8:09 Eastern time. So you're seeing some downpours and some thunderstorms occurring from northwest Ohio back across northern Indiana, northern Illinois, southern parts of Wisconsin, and they're moving east-south-eastward. So, again, that warm frontal boundary setting up. Also seeing some showers and storms popping up in parts of upstate New York, and then way up along the Canadian border. Not a whole lot of activity happening across the U.S. today. We do have downpours and some thunderstorms over central and south Florida, and it looks like some hefty storm, a couple of hefty storms in and around Tampa Bay, and then down the coast, down along the west coast, and also down on the east coast. But the concentration seems to be over in central Florida. And then we also have some cells tonight going on through parts of North Texas and in through the Oklahoma Panhandle. I'm going to just pull up the risk area that is in effect at the moment. And you can see on SPC's map, we've got enhanced risk across Illinois and Indiana inside a larger area of slight risk that extends into Iowa on one side and Ohio on the other, and a bigger area of marginal risk that runs southwestward into the storms that you see up in northern Texas, northwest Texas, and on up through the Oklahoma Panhandle. Also a small area of marginal risk up through parts of the Dakotas. So let's take you through what we think is going to happen for tomorrow. I'm just going to widen out. Again, don't focus too much on what the models are showing specifically too much on the radar. I think when you see this sort of setup, any of these severe weather setups, just recognize that if you are in the area of risk, and then from there, just follow the radars, because they're going to tell you tomorrow, not the forecasts, obviously, but when the actual radars start showing where the thunderstorms form, I think you will know if you're a regular here, it's probably not going to show up like you're seeing on some of the model maps. So here's the NAM model's view of its radar, and we're at 1 o'clock in the afternoon tomorrow. So there's some renegade, and part of this may be the warm sector setting up. So there's some renegade downpours and thunderstorms coming in around midday, if that's correct. And then you get the main line that comes in late in the afternoon and evening. Sometimes if you get these lead storms, they can wind up stabilizing the atmosphere somewhat. In other words, they use up some of the energy that's around, and then when the line comes, the storms that form with those might be subdued in those particular areas. So that's something that we're going to want to pay attention to as well. But it does fire up some strong storms tomorrow evening that run down into southern New Jersey, and then of course after that the line weakens. But that's the NAM's view, and it's entitled to its opinion. That was from earlier today, by the way. So when we look at the late afternoon run, it seems to do less with this lead area. Actually has a couple of showers tomorrow morning moving across northern New Jersey and Long Island, a couple of downpours that go by. And then you really don't get much until after about 2 or 3 o'clock. Then you start to really fire them up going into tomorrow evening, and they get particularly strong. This particular run seems to want to have them closer to where the low center is, where the wave goes by, and rather than having a line further south, it actually has two separate areas. You've got the first area that runs across northern New Jersey into southern New England, and then a second area that forms back over in western Maryland, northern West Virginia, and southern New Jersey, and then that just kind of falls apart. This is why I think you drive yourself crazy from run to run, trying to gain some kind of confidence as to which model has the best handle on these things, when in reality it has been a lot better to just wait to see what's on the radars tomorrow morning going into midday, and then watch the radars blossom. Now here's the HRRR, for example, which tomorrow afternoon fires up a few storms offshore and really doesn't have very much. I mean, it forms some storms down in parts of Virginia and in southernmost New Jersey, forms a couple of cells up in Connecticut, and really doesn't have much to show in between. So again, it's going to be about whatever the radar. We recognize that the risk is there, and we will, we're going to respect that. And we'll see what SPC does with this tomorrow morning. I imagine they're not going to change it too much. I can't imagine them beefing it up even more unless there's some obvious reason for them to do it. It's pretty beefed up as it is. So following the weather pattern as we had over the weekend, looking at the upper air, our trough from the weekend with that beautiful dry air mass pulling out. Here comes the next shortwave trough not as well defined as some of the other ones have been, but it's still, there's a pretty good kink in there. And then the trough just kind of hangs back around the Great Lakes for the rest of the week. So that causes the front to stall off the East Coast. And we've been talking about that back late last week on maybe the possibility of something spinning up off the southeast coast of the United States. We'll take a closer look at that in a second. But going forward, you're still wanting to have this jet extend a bit further south along the East Coast into early next week. Then the ridge kind of tries to build a little bit. You see how the jet pulls back up into Canada, and it seems to stay there for much of the period after we get through. I'm just going to back it up here. So the beginning of next week, it pulls the jet up and just kind of leaves it there, not too far south of the Canadian border, but it does keep it up there. And it seems to want to have more troughing out in the west. So the jet does pull up, and you do have this model run building a ridge, a rather strong one, in the middle Mississippi Valley, big upper high there. Also, I'm sure it's probably everybody's looking at that what's in the Gulf of Mexico as the model's firing something up from looks like some kind of tropical wave that moves across the Bahamas and then goes west. But we know how to treat these things in the long range. We're still waiting for that third system to develop, and I still think we'll have to keep our eyes on whatever goes on off the southeast coast for later this week. So here's how the surface plays out. And I'm just going to go back. We'll just roll it backwards and let the maps load. Now, there's our front for Tuesday night into Wednesday. It's probably better. I'm going to switch to the radar view here. So the front goes offshore. It's going to stall out. You've got a wave that develops Wednesday night into Thursday and moves out. You still have this frontal boundary here going into the weekend. Meanwhile, in the east, it looks pretty decent. There's a weak disturbance on Thursday that moves across western New York and western PA and heads up into New England. Doesn't look like it produces very much. The high goes out, but that boundary is still going to be there. The GFS is really kind of backed off on the idea of some kind of wave spinning up and turning into something tropical. We're going to leave the door open as long as the frontal boundary is out there. And it appears that we might be going into some period of relative calmness. If the jet stream pulls up along the Canadian border, we probably won't be seeing shortwave troughs coming down, obviously. So that would perhaps, unless the model's completely wrong, perhaps this episode that we're going through tomorrow might be the last one for a while. I would be cautious about that because the mid-cycle runs, I didn't get a chance to look at the prior run upper air. So let's do that really fast, because lately it's been a case of the models on the the primary runs keeping the trough in the east into the long term, and then the in-between runs pulling it out. I just want to see what it does here. So this is pretty consistent for this week with the front stalling along the east coast. Swings a short wave through on Monday. Yeah, even this run, even the prior run tries to build a ridge, but then it just begins to collapse that jet a bit in the longer range, and it always seems to keep it hanging there right along the Canadian border. And also this run does look like it wants to build some kind of a ridge in the eastern half of the United States in the longer term, which would take us down now toward the end of the month. So look, the bottom line is, first things first, of course, tomorrow with the severe weather possibilities that we're going to see, again, follow the radars, and tomorrow morning we'll probably have a good feel of where the daytime heating is going on. Follow the radars around midday into the afternoon, see where everything develops, and then you take it from there. All right, nice to see a pretty good crowd on tonight. We haven't had a crowd like this lately, which is nice. Let me bring myself up on the screen here. By the way, let me remind you, if you are on my weather app, and have an Android device, be sure to update it. If it hasn't updated itself, you might have to delete it and reinstall it. The update, when you go to your local forecast page, should take you automatically to your own location. That's one of the new changes that we've added. Also, when you go to the radar should also take you to your own location, and you can widen it out. I have it's set to where it's going to come. The shot should be fairly tight wherever you happen to be, but you can manually widen it out with your fingers. Just put them on the screen and do this, and it'll make the picture bigger. If you haven't downloaded it, it's meteorologist Joe Chaffee or just Joe Chaffee on Google Play. And as far as the iPhone is concerned, the same update will play out to the iPhone. It just hasn't been done yet. Just waiting for Apple to do it. So that could come anytime. But it's already there for those of you who are on an Android device. Jason Schaefer, just looks like the jet wants to head back north, even though we're going later in the summer. Seems like that wants to happen in the latter part of the past number of summers, where suddenly you got a ridge building, and we wind up with these extensions of warm air, of warm weather that lasts through the first part of September, but it seems to time out that way. It may coincide with an increase in tropical activity. If we wind up with a ridge in the east, that would be something that might favor areas more to the west or in the Gulf of Mexico. Car recalls the app. I'm not getting any posts from New Jersey or Long Island. Okay, the New Jersey post is usually the default home post unless something specifically for New Jersey is happening. As far as Long Island is concerned, because I've been kind of working on all these technical things, I haven't had a chance to do the specific Long Island post since the one I did from last week. So the updates for Long Island and will come when I have the time to do it, which right now I haven't. But ideally, I would like to do one a day, and if I can get get in sync and get on track to do it on a regular basis, hopefully I can pull that off. So just try and be patient with regards to that. Iron Mine 10, I see sometimes cells split to the north of New York City and south to central Jersey, and Long Island gets nothing. Just remember, though, in the last severe weather episode last week, that was not the case, and Long Island did wind up getting some fairly hefty thunderstorms that moved on through. Ryan Ford, do I see anything that break this pattern of that buckling back and forth? Certainly today's run of the GFS suggests that will be the case. I just did not get a chance to look at the European or spend a whole lot of time on the long range today. So I will be taking a look at that over the next couple of days. OKGAG, armadillos are nasty critters and will do real damage to animals, vehicles, and kids should they feel threatened. That was one of my first revelations, OKGAG, when I moved to Texas back in 1982 to see armadillo roadkill. I mean, that was that was something I did not expect. No one warned me about that. But yeah, they can be fairly nasty. Also opossums, especially the ones that come out in the fall sometimes, they can scream bloody murder when they're outside. Javon Perry, I don't think this time north and west of Boston is going to see that much. I agree. The El Nino, by the way, is gone. El Nino is gone. But I agree. This time around, I don't think that warm sector gets much further north. You probably push it up to about Route 84. That might be it. So if you don't get warm sectored, you might have maybe some overrunning precip with some embedded thunderstorms, although I have to tell you that was something that earlier models were kind of, and it kind of looked like it was going to go that way, but they seem to have backed off on that idea. So it may just be whatever convection forms with the front in the warm sector and not a whole lot that goes on to the north of it. Again, we're just going to have to wait till tomorrow morning to watch what the radars are showing us. David Schwartz, the dark streaks, why the enhanced risk will be pushed northward, and they very well may do that. We'll know at this time tomorrow morning. It's usually about the time that the morning forecast from SPC. That's usually about the time that the new forecast comes out, and we'll see what they do. I can't imagine that they would be any less than what they've had to have today. The models are still, all pretty consistent and fairly bullish. Some variation from run to run, a little less on some runs, a little more on the others, but they still have a fairly bullish view. They all seem to have a very full bullish view on thunderstorms for tomorrow. And with those bursts that you saw on the NAM model from earlier, just bear in mind, we have seen instances of rotation and tornadoes in these recent outbreaks, so I don't see why it should be any different for tomorrow. All right, folks, going to call it a night. Thanks for being here. Again, make sure you download the app if you haven't already. It's just go to Google Play or the App Store and just search my name, Joe Chaffee, or meteorologist Joe Chaffee, and the app is absolutely free. Hey, Lord Kate, you haven't been on in a while. Nice to see you on board. Also, just trying to think of any other things that are going on for this coming week. Nothing that really stands out. I think once we get through this severe weather outbreak, we can, take a breather for a little while as far as thunderstorms are concerned. And let's leave it at that. All right. So everybody have a great evening. At least my first attempt to live stream on my new computer seems to have worked out fairly well, so I'm very happy about that. Weather in 5 tomorrow morning, so we'll give you a severe weather update. It's on my Facebook page, but it also comes up here on my YouTube channel, so you make sure you watch that, and it is also on the app. And we'll be now tomorrow night's live stream is going to be weather. Tomorrow night's live stream is going to be weather dependent. If I got a lot of severe weather around, I'll have to figure out when I can do the live stream. It may not happen until late in the evening when the severe weather winds up calming down. So just look for a schedule post and a notification of when the time will be, especially for Patreon members. I'll try to give you a couple of hours heads up as far as what time the live stream is going to be on Tuesday. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for being here. We'll see you tomorrow.